Welcome, Ben Lee, to the Empowered Team podcast. And it used to be formerly the Empowered Athlete podcast. And we today are so lucky to have Ben Lee here, founder, CEO of 4BPM. And Ben is in the process of delivering incredible health services via blood tests, hormone therapies, different things that can optimize performance, especially in this day and age where a lot of people might feel like they're burning themselves out or they just can't put their finger on what the problem is. So welcome, Ben. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Kari.
Yeah, no problem. And we have a few things in common in a number of friends that we have in common. And we also have the utmost respect for Tony Robbins.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. I literally live right across the water from him, so I can basically almost see his house. And I've been going to him since 2005.
Very cool.
15 years. Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow, that's you look back and you're like, how did the decades get away? All of a sudden, you're looking at going, you're almost looking at 20 years, right? So
yeah,
it's very
crazy.
cool.
Yeah.
So you are in this business that really serves to help people feel their best. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. What I like to say is, our mission is to help people discover their cheat code to live their best life, because people understand that. And whatever that looks like for you, whether it's building muscle, burning fat, having more energy, sleeping better, or feeling younger, or even just bringing the best version of yourself to your mission every single day. We help people do that by just asking their body a series of questions through blood testing, genetic testing, and metabolomics, which is urine test. Because your body's infinitely intelligent, and as long as you understand which questions to ask it and how to interpret the information that it provides back, we create highly customized protocols where we don't have to stab in the dark. There's no guessing. Your body's going to tell me. So it's all about just providing the body with the raw materials that it needs in the proper amounts to operate at its absolute peak.
Very cool. Now, you said you do blood and you do urine
and genetics too.
And genetic testing. So like a DNA kind of profiling.
Correct.
So now the DNA, that's going to be, their genetic makeup. The blood and the urine, do you have to do multiple tests to see if something's different from, say, a time of day or one day to another day? Or is it enough for you to just kind of grab the one test, and is that going to give you enough information for what you need?
Well, it depends on the individual, because again, we do customize each protocol. Some people come specifically to us for, let's say, the methylation piece, which is genetic. And methylation is probably one of the most important processes in the body that no one's ever heard about. And it's responsible for everything from neurological function, cardiovascular function, immune function, detoxification, DNA and RNA synthesis, the production and metabolism of your neurotransmitters, production of hormones, creatine to allow your muscles to contract, even energy production and fat metabolism. And if you have poor methylation, it manifests itself as ADHD, OCD, anxiety, depression, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, gut issues, certain cancers, heart disease, fibromyalgia. I mean, the list goes on. That's only half. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And the typical traditional allopathic disciplines, what do? They typically prescribe a pill for every one of those ills. Right. So, for ADHD alone, they have 5, right? It's Adderall, Strattera, Ritalin, Vyvanse, Quebble. For depression, I mean, geez, there's not even a quarter of them. Cymbalta, Paxil, Prozac, Wellbutrin, Abilify, Lexapro. And that's not even, I think there's like 30 of them now.
The pharmaceuticals will go on and on. For our listeners, so most people, I don't think, will have heard of methylation. Can you tell us a little bit more about this is it a genetic test? Tell us more about what this methylation is.
Sure. So methylation is, I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. It is your body's ability or inability to convert or activate certain compounds in your own body into usable forms. So if you think about like a conveyor belt, right? A conveyor belt that has widgets. If you have full, let's say, capacity to methylate, right? There's an arm to pull over every single widget to the next part of the process. So nothing's falling on the ground. Everything's 100% efficient. All the other subsequent processes are getting the raw materials that they need to operate properly. And sometimes we have what we call the genetic mutation, where it actually reduces our capacity to methylate. And there's two different types where one is about a 40% capacity to methylate. So let's say for every one that gets pulled over, one falls on the ground. For every one that gets pulled over, one falls on the ground. So obviously not as good as the full capacity to methylate. And then the worst one is where you have none whatsoever. So everything literally just falls on the ground. And if you can visualize all of the subsequent processes, none of those processes are getting the raw materials that they need.
So and now I'm just speculating here. So it sounds like this methylation would be this combination of, neurotransmitters and hormones and receptors, like the catalysts that keep things going. And then, so this methylation is just whether the things are doing what they're supposed to do when to create the outcome that would mean our body is functioning optimally.
Correct.
Is that kind of just dumb it down right down there?
Yeah, absolutely. And the great thing is that it's genetic in a sense that it won't change.
Yeah.
And it's luckily what we call an actionable gene. So for example, if you have blue eyes, you can't change that permanently, unless contacts don't really count, or if you get that crazy injection in your eye, right? Obviously, no one wants to do that. Or your hair. And was it you that called me out of this? It was like, your hair doesn't change unless it turns gray. Right.
Well, so to that point though, when we consider a lot of the things that are causing the problems in these systems, so if someone's not able to, I don't know if I can use it as a verb, methylate the way as a verb, methylate the way they would optimally, what are you seeing? Because you've got experience seeing, you see a person come in, you might have profiled them. I'm just guessing here. You might have profiled them. They've got some habits. They've got some, you can see their profile. You can see their blood. You can see some weight issues. You can see some blood pressure. Some things that are causing those. What do you think would be, say, the top 3 things that are contributing to this dysfunction in their genetic code that's malleable?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not understanding which specific compounds that you can't methylate, for example. So one of them is specifically folic acid. And, there's a lot of misinformation about folic acid. A lot of people use the word folic acid and folate interchangeably. Mm-hmm. But there is a difference. Folic acid is synthetic. It's man-made.
Yeah.
Whereas folate is either naturally occurring or the activated form of folic acid. And there are a lot of people that can't actually methylate or utilize folic acid. And you hear all the stories out there about women, especially that go through pregnancy. They have huge emotional outbursts. They have postpartum depression. And one of the hypotheses that we have is in prenatals, they have sometimes 200, 300, 400 times the recommended amount of folic acid, the synthetic form, in their formulations. And if, let's say, you have the complete inability to convert, what you're doing is you're literally oversaturating your body with something that you can't even utilize. And
on that specific point, I'm just going to ask a couple of questions on that specific point. At one point, I talked to a friend who was a well-educated naturopath, and on that topic alone, she had said that over 50% of people simply cannot process the folic acid. And it's so prevalent that in the UK, overseas, they don't allow supplements to be given with folic acid in it. Is that the case still?
Yeah, and it depends on the specific background of the individual. There are percentages, and it depends on, obviously, if it's of European descent, African descent, or Asian descent. There are different percentages with regards to people that typically have that particular mutation. And it's interesting that you speak about, things in, let's say, Europe versus here. There's things that are allowed in our food system and in our food sources, in the United States, even in Canada, that are different.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting where I get this sometimes where, we do the diagnostics and, we provide them the protocol and they're like, oh, you know what? I think we're just going to try to eat better and, do some things better and see if we can move, the needle, on our biomarkers. And, unfortunately in the United States, our food supply is just really terrible. We've basically watered it down to where there aren't nutrient rich anymore.
Yeah.
So, we're having to supplement with other supplements, vitamins, minerals, because we just can't get the required amount of, nutrition out of our food sources.
So between a depleted topsoil, between mass farming, between just modified foods that may not be the way they used to be, or they're being modified to grow from mass instead of quality or density. So you're pointing to a number of things that are there systemically. So it sounds to me like, you might have a person or two, or maybe many people who decide, okay, I'm going to make these changes now that I have this information. And sometimes it's just not enough for what they want, for the kind of feeling or life or performance that they want, because when they go to make those changes, they just don't have access to amazing high nutrient and vitamin, mineral, micronutrient dense foods. So now, in your opinion, I'm in a situation where right now I'm in a remote place in Canada just for the season, for this summer. And I've been fortunate enough to be eating a bunch of foods from someone's hydroponic farm that's next door, and a number of foods from a family member's garden that's been growing all summer in an area that's very remote. So there's no pesticides, there's no neighbors, there's no, it's in the remote forest kind of thing. So I'm lucky enough to be able to have access to these beans and peas and zucchinis and tomatoes and cucumbers and wild blueberries from the north, so I have all these things coming in. But when you think about it, that's not normal for the average person in Canada, the US, Europe, wherever. That's just not normal. So if someone didn't go the route of, because I still have people, even if I tell them what the lay of the land is now, and I'm asking them to supplement because they are not going to get the variety based on what their needs are, and they're not going to have the sources. But if someone still says, I don't want to supplement, I want my food to be the be all end all, my food is the only way I'm going to get my nutrients, what would you recommend to them? Are they to go to an organic market every week? Are they to, obviously I think most of us know to look for whole foods, but what else would you say if something different than that?
Yeah, I mean, other than, just trying to find organic sources of foods, trying to get a variety of obviously different colors, trying to just keep the sources as varied as possible.
Yeah, and that's the thing,
get a bunch
because
of different things.
Usually if you find people who are willing to get in the routines of, if they're exercising regularly and they're eating well regularly, they're typically routine based. So you're going to see a lot of the same breakfasts, same lunches, same dinners, or a rotation of 3 or 4 of the similar things. So there's not that massive variety. And that's the other problem I see come in this, first world problem of not getting the nutrients that people ideally want for their best performance physically and mentally in what they want to do.
Right, because we're all looking for convenience, and obviously I'm extremely guilty of that. I remember this is about maybe like 15 years ago. I was introduced to a nutritionist, and she got me hooked on raw foods, dehydrating, and I remember I kind of literally dove in head first, so to speak. Bought a dehydrator, sprouted some grains and whatnot, and then I realized how just inefficient it was. It took me a week to sprout the grains, and create the bread, get like do like an avocado spread and whatnot. And I literally ate it in like a minute for all for that. I was like, okay, this isn't gonna work. And I was like,
Yeah.
it tasted good, but I was like, okay, yeah, that this is just too much time, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, we just we just can't create something that's super simplified and efficient,
Yeah.
where we can really get nutrient dense foods, obviously a diverse group of them easily. So yeah, it is difficult.
And I don't want to spend too much time on the nutrition aspect, but I do want to say that the other thing too that people don't realize is that even if they are getting a nutrient profile panel or testing of some sort, they're often falling within normal without
Right.
realizing that it's not the best for what they could potentially be feeling or performing, or the best for their optimal health. It's just within normal. And I say that because so for a number of years, I worked with Hockey Canada, leading the women's national hockey team in strengthening, or helping them with strength and conditioning, going into Sochi in 2014. And, these are high level athletes who are inside most of the time for most of the year.
Right. So
And
very low D3 levels. Yeah.
absolutely. And the thing is that if any one of them went to their physician, they would typically be within normal,
Right.
but it wasn't optimal for the kind of performance and demand physically that they needed. So, those are some of the things that I try to tell regular clients that, I think my D levels are normal. Well, if you live in Canada or in the Northern Hemisphere, they're just not, because you're not getting outdoors 30 minutes a day at least. And
Right.
it's, or within the right time frame. And most people just don't know that. And that's one of the top 5 most efficacious supplements that there are. And
Absolutely.
and yet a lot of people just don't know that. So what they think is within normal, or what their physician, especially a general practitioner who's dealing with the masses, they're not gonna even mention it if they're not showing some real problems of low vitamin D, so those types of things I think are falling below the radar for a lot of people, and that they figure they're normal, they figure they're fine, and they're being compared to what now normal is massively unhealthy, with over 50% of the US being obese now. So if we're speaking to a population who wants their best health, then we're speaking to people who are now in the, they might be in the
Single percentage.
Exactly, single digits, 5%. And so if that's the case, then you're really narrowing, at least it narrows your market. But for those who are looking to get healthy and maybe they're ready to make these changes, sometimes you've got tools like hormonal tools that can help them round that corner when you see things that are just glaringly off. Clearly I'm going to guess here, you're probably going to know that sleep, nutrition, exercise are the big 3. Would you agree with that, or is there something new?
Yeah, sleep. Because obviously, with sleep, it's extremely important to recover. If it doesn't matter how hard you go, in the gym, you don't build muscle there.
Yeah.
You build muscle, when you rest. You tear your muscles, when you're working out. But the hyperplasia, that's when you're actually building muscle when you're sleeping. Same thing, with your memories, right? You can't actually lock in long-term memories until you sleep. And that's the one thing a lot of people just really don't get high quality sleep. And I have a lot of people that come to me specifically for sleep, and I'll be completely honest with them. It's one of the hardest things to figure out, because again, there's so many variables that come into play with sleep. It could be hormones, it could be a lack of, let's say, progesterone. It could be that you don't have enough, let's say, testosterone to signal your bone marrow to create more red blood cells and hemoglobin. So you can't carry oxygen. And if you can't carry oxygen, you're going to be tired, especially when you're trying to sleep. You can't carry enough oxygen, so you become hypoxic, right? So then you're not getting enough oxygen to really recover well. It could be because your bed sucks, you haven't flipped in a while. It could be because your significant other wants it too hot or too cold. It could be an actual physical issue where you have like sleep apnea physically. or it could be actually a methylation issue. One of the things that occurred to me was I have a particular break where if I ingest cyanocobalamin, which is a form of B12, I literally have racing thoughts where I can't go to sleep. Doesn't matter how physically or mentally exhausted I am, my mind will race a million miles a minute and I cannot turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
So, it could be, a whole host of reasons. And, that's why we have to be, really diligent in basically just crossing things off the list.
So do you find that with your clients, especially if it's a hormone or a supplement prescription or suggestion, do you find that you are going through a trial and error with them a lot? Try something and then go, okay, well, this is feeling better. Like, is it like that? Or is it's feeling better and here are my blood markers now? Like, what does that look like?
That's a funny question. And again, I'm going to bring this up as kind of a joke, but it's kind of, it's actually kind of the truth. So, the meme, it's like, okay, how do you turn a man on versus how do you turn a woman on? A man, it's like a light switch. Women, it's like 100 different knobs and dials. Yeah. It's like the exact same thing with their hormones. Yeah. So if you give a male who has low testosterone, they're going to feel better almost 100% of the time, on-off switch. Women, on the other hand, because again, they're dealing with so many different hormones. I mean, you're dealing with luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, estradiol, estriol, progesterone, and a lot of the times when you're looking at women, their hormones, you actually have to, by process of elimination, figure out where they are in their menstrual cycle or if they're postmenopausal. Mm-hmm. And there's some women where it doesn't all line up in the same phase. Mm-hmm. So their hormones are completely out of whack, and we see a lot of women have, let's say issues with what we call estrogen dominance, where they have 100 times more estrogen than progesterone. And, they'll work out 5-6 days a week. They'll be on a diet, and it doesn't matter what they do. Like, they literally will not be able to lose the weight around, their belly. Mm-hmm. Until you're able to fix that hormonal issue.
And when you say fix that like what might that look like for someone who's got a lot of estrogen and is doing all the right things and she's not losing it around her belly? And what might that look like for them trying to fix it? What might be some 2 or 3 top approaches you would use?
Sure. So one of the things what works extremely well is, we'll take a woman's blood labs, so it'll actually measure, those hormones I just mentioned. And then we'll also provide them with a symptom sheet, so their symptomology could be anything from crying easily, weight gain, insomnia, tiredness, fatigue. There's some other ones, obviously, that are very female related. And on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 not being an issue, 10 being a major issue, we provide that to one of our master pharmacists who's been doing this for about 3 decades. Mm-hmm. And we create a highly customized, hormone replacement therapy protocol, for our female patients. So we can look at anything from, let's say, 1 hormone to 6, and it could also include thyroid hormones too, depending on, what their labs tell us. So, the tablet, which is really, really super simple to take. It's just typically 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. So it's much easier than having to do injectables. And I know there's other delivery systems, such as like creams and whatnot. So that we don't really like as much because, again, there's so much variability in the absorption rates of creams or pellets. And pellets. I'm not a fan of pellets either.
Okay.
Because go ahead.
You're not so what was the first thing you said? It was oral you are a fan of?
So yeah, orals are better. Yeah, orals are better because with any type of subdermal or I'm sorry, transdermal, especially if it's a cream of some sort, you really don't know what the consistency of the absorption rate is. So if you put it on your, let's say your underarm versus your arm, versus like your arm versus your legs or whatever it may be, there's obviously different thicknesses of the skin in different areas. And then the pellets, oh man, I see this all the time where women have 4 to 5 times more than where they should be in their clinical reference range.
So it's just released too much too fast?
Yeah, and things grow that aren't supposed to grow.
Not nice. So I just want anyone who's listening to the podcast, maybe earmuffs for the little ones for a second. I've heard of women using a cream to just kind of help more for an acute arousal on the nether regions in order for just to help them if they're postmenopausal. Is that something that the creams would be appropriate for versus changing a whole overall health profile?
Honestly, I don't have too much experience with that, to be completely honest. So I don't have any personal experience from it. So I wouldn't know.
Okay, I've heard of it though. I've heard of a few things. So on that note, so I'm gonna actually tell you something I do have experience with that is more personal for my end, because some women may be in this boat like me. And then I'm gonna ask a couple male questions because I got a number of questions from men on this topic as well. But for me personally, I've gone through menopause, and in doing that, and genetically, most of the women in my maternal side of my family went through menopause fairly early, but still within the normal range. So around that 47-year-old kind of range. And but when I went through menopause, when this was going on, it was right in COVID, and I had the full-on wide awake at 2 a.m. Like I could have run a marathon or built a business or done any of the high demand things at that time. And it was just almost this extreme agitation and massive hot flashes, and then just that anxiety or agitation that I wouldn't ordinarily have. So just feeling all these things were going on. And I also had clients, friends, other women that had reported, well, you should really do some estrogen supplementing. Now, there's two reasons why I was a hard no on that. Now, number one was that I figured that I am one of the healthiest people that I know in terms of top 1% in terms of fitness, strength, overall health. So I thought to myself in the back of my mind, I just want to give my body a chance to figure this out before I do something else. And when I say a chance, I wanted to give it like a good 6 to 8 months, even though it might have sucked at the time. That was kind of my rationale. But the second major thing was that a maternal aunt has a genetic, a gene marker that is such a high cancer risk, meaning, if they have this gene, that means that they should get a mastectomy. They will likely get a hysterectomy as preventative measures, and they'll still have to do constant liver monitoring because it's over an 86% chance that they will get certain types of cancers.
Right.
So my maternal aunt has this gene, it's confirmed. And so right around that same time, I was waiting to find out whether my mother had the gene, which would put me in the mix, and my daughter's in the mix for having that gene. So I wasn't going to touch any estrogen supplementation at that time because of that genetic factor. I was waiting out to see whether I had potential to have this gene. So I had two major reasons, but ultimately, as I found out, my mother doesn't have the gene, which brings it so that I wouldn't have the gene and my daughters wouldn't have the gene. So my mother doesn't have the gene. So that was awesome. But B, as I gave it the time, then everything stabilized. And apparently, what's her name? I think it's Dr. Lisa. She does research on women's brains and hormones. But apparently the research says that the brains eventually adapt in going through the hormone change. So I waited it out, and eventually the hot flashes decreased, subsided, or disappeared. I could sleep normally again. I wasn't going through the insane changes in energy or agitation or things like that. And everything just kind of adapted. And now I was living kind of normal life like I used to without a menstrual cycle, which is like, okay, this is kind of awesome. Made it through, shining colors. So I really wouldn't have a reason to. However, there's a number of people that I knew who would be going through the exact same thing and wouldn't have the no as hard as my no's were to try something else. And so because they weren't getting the sleep, they were losing their mind, they might have kids or family demands or work demands. And they're like, give me some estrogen. away we go. What are your thoughts on that kind of overall story? Is there, would you have suggestions for people in different situations? Do you try to give a timeline, especially if they're beginning of menopause, or is it like, okay, try this right now? Or what's the, what kind of approach do you take overall?
Honestly, it's a case by case basis because everyone is so different. And as I mentioned before, women are 100 different knobs and dials. Our experience going through perimenopause into menopause is different from a lot of women. There are some similarities, but it's never going to be 100% the same. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to that, we really have to really just unique in each protocol, because like you said, there are some people that have, let's say, a genetic predisposition to cancers, right? Mm-hmm. So then you can't touch the estrogens at all. If they have, let's say, high prostate specific antigen, or if cancer is in the familial history, that's going to be an issue as well. So we really have to address each individual based on their own case, because even if you have, let's say, the gene, and let's say you have a sister that doesn't have the gene, so then just because you have basically most of the same DNA, but it's still going to be different in that sense, because let's say your mother was carrier, give it to you, but didn't give it to your sister. So exactly like how your mother and her sister are.
Yeah, and to that point, it's very refreshing to hear that from you, as in the case by case, individual by individual, because so many people are trying to jump on, whether it's a hormone program or a diet or an exercise program that worked for so and so, but aren't testing or experimenting with themselves to figure themselves out. They're trying to grab what worked for so and so, apply it to themselves, and it might feel great for a week, 6 weeks, something, but then it's just either not sustainable or doesn't work long term because they haven't tried to figure the things out for their own body. So, I think I might be.
Lost you there for a second. You froze there for a second. Okay.
Yeah, so they haven't tried to figure out what might work or not work for their own body, and that hurts them in the long run, because then they end up going through this giving up and beating themselves up or feeling like nothing will work kind of scenario. Oh, we froze again. There we are. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yep, yeah, you froze again.
Yeah, so I imagine it can be very frustrating for people when they're just trying to slap something on, and it's not working. So when it comes to men, the light switch, you mentioned testosterone, and I know that for men who specifically are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, they're starting to feel the effects of just their testosterone slowly decreasing due to age. And maybe they're not as active as they used to be. Maybe they don't eat as well as they used to, or maybe they're just, they're not paying attention to it as much, but they're feeling those effects. It's usually energy. It's usually a few different things. But what are your thoughts on, do you think that some men will never need to supplement with testosterone? Do you think that all men should? I don't want to blanket statement it. I know it is individual, but what are you seeing at this point with people that you work with in their needs, or what's happening for men and their supplementation hormonally?
Sure. So we actually let their body determine that, because everyone's a little bit different, in the sense that your body may be, let's say, your pituitary gland, and again, we utilize luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone as well to signal the testes to create our own natural testosterone and spermatogenesis. But sometimes your body is signaling, your testes to create it, but it's not coming out, right? So those people have to go, to testosterone replacement therapy if they want the benefits, obviously, of having testosterone. Whereas some other people, their signals are a little bit lower with regards to the LH and FSH. So we can actually help boost their signal and then help to basically just support, their own natural testosterone production. So really their body's going to determine which way we go. And obviously there are some people that are kind of, let's say, in that gray area. Obviously with men in, let's say before 35, we try to err towards, having their own body produce it. And people like around 35 to let's say 45 are kind of in that gray area. They kind of have a decision to make, so to speak. Once you start taking testosterone, you're going to have to be on it if you want to obviously, maintain those benefits. So, it's kind of a personal choice, in a sense, but, we'll obviously provide them with, with the specific recommendations. Hey, you should probably go this way because of, A, B, and C, or, go this way because of, D, E, and F.
I want to distinguish for people too, because there's a lot of, sometimes people will think of taking testosterone or growth hormone or something like that, and automatically they think of steroids and banned substances. And I come from a background where we had to avoid anything like that at all costs, because it simply meant being banned from the Olympics, or the whole team being banned if one person tested positive for something. But in these situations, what we're talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is basically micro supplementing. It's these small amounts based on what that person might benefit from. Is that correct?
Right. All we're trying to do is to get them to the optimal range.
Okay.
When you're talking about, let's say, bodybuilders or actual steroids, they're taking sometimes 10 to 25 times as much as what we do in a week, during that same time frame. And, they're doing cocktails of multiple types of anabolics. So, it's much different in that sense. We're just looking to replace what the body already had at one point in time. And then, in doing so, you're going to feel like you did when you had those levels. It's not rocket science, but it's just a different, mindset, because, we mentioned before with regards to, people going to their physicians, and it's interesting. I hear this story all the time. They go to their doctor because something is off, right? Where they don't feel great. They're not sleeping well, they don't have energy or whatever it may be. And, the doctor runs tests. So, after running tests, they go back, and then the doctor says, "You're fine." It's like, no, but I feel like crap. No, you're fine. And, it's just that back and forth of, they just try to fix issues. And the reference range for laboratories differ. So LabCorp is different from Quest, is different from other ones. Yeah. So that reference range is literally just, whatever the majority of that patient population is. Right. So I can actually, tell, obviously, we work with LabCorp, and I obviously memorize most of their reference ranges. But yeah, like I said, it's completely different. And when you're talking about athletes, right, they're already the top 1 of 1%. So their optimal range is significantly different than obviously the majority of the population. And, I have 4 physicians in my family. All right. So, I'm kind of the black sheep of the family. I went the other way, and, they're great for, whatever it is, like acute care. If it's like, let's say cancers, actually my mother just was diagnosed with cancer last year, with endometrial cancer, and literally within a few months, surgery, irradiation, everything, right? And it reduced the probability of relapse to like single digits, right? So that's what's amazing. But when it comes to chronic issues, that's where, they have a major issue, because with the traditional allopathic disciplines, all they do is diagnose symptomology, and then they treat the symptomology instead of actually looking at root cause. What's causing the symptomology? So, that's the major disconnect, in, the quote unquote healthcare, just equation. Because if you are just treating symptomology, then you're stuck for a protocol that they give you, or pharmaceutical that they give you forever, until you actually fix the root cause. So, it's all just about allowing your body to heal itself. Just give it what it needs, and makes it super simple. Yeah,
it is incredibly remarkable what the body can actually do. I mean, this could be a whole rabbit hole in and of itself. We don't want to go down, but why aren't things like that standardized? Because the layperson, the person who's the patient, if they've got some numbers, they're going to think that normal means normal somewhere else and somewhere else, or optimal means optimal. Why isn't that standardized?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know why it's not standardized. And, I think the reason why is because they believe that, based on geographical location, in that population, you're going to have certain, let's say, nuances with regards to health.
Yeah.
Right. So, you talk about, like, say, the blue or the Mediterranean diet, that's going to be a little bit different versus, let's say, Nebraska.
Yeah.
Right. So, they utilize, more of a geographical approach there.
Versus
But
ethnic background, versus there's so many other gender, there's just so many other confounders too. But and that's the thing, you'd think that there were standards, because these are pretty apparent differences between humans: gender, age, ethnicity, even, you live in certain areas, you got different minerals in the soil. So,
right.
but you'd think that just the main ones, gender, age, ethnicity, that there would be some optimal standards for those categories. But who I'm just voicing the ideals, right? But so if someone, now back to the testosterone, if this was, I knew some people a long time ago who would take steroids, would take growth hormone, would take testosterone. And one person I knew in particular, he did it for so long and so much that eventually his testes were just not doing what they were supposed to do. And eventually he ended up going to the hospital because they were just shrinking away, kind of thing. So, and I don't say that for a shock factor. I say that because ultimately the big drawback is that if there was, to your point, when someone's taking steroids, they're supplementing maybe 50 times or 20 times or whatever, what you are talking about here. So it's a different ballgame. But that one factor of, if there's something else stimulating the production, or if the testosterone is being replaced, then does that not hamper that individual's ability to produce it themselves?
No, absolutely. Yeah, anytime you introduce exogenous or outside testosterone, your body recognizes it, and it's a negative feedback loop. So what that means is, if it recognizes testosterone is there, it'll say, okay, well, I don't need any more, and shut off its own natural production. And for people that are on it for long periods of time, especially when they abuse it to let's say the bodybuilder level, then it might be more difficult to basically re-engage or restart their own natural testosterone production. So one of the worst things you could do is go on, let's say, testosterone replacement therapy and just go cold turkey. That's one of the worst things you can do.
Okay.
There's what we call post-cycle therapy, where you can at least re-engage whatever you had left, so to speak, and it's not as much of a crash, because I've been using testosterone for almost a decade, actually.
How old?
And I'm 42. Yeah, and I remember when I wasn't as consistent with it, I think I went like 3 weeks, without a shot. And I remember just sitting down, and I was like, kind of like moping around, kind of depressed. And then oh, I just felt off. And I was like, oh, what's wrong? And then just like, oh, I hadn't taken a shot. So I literally took a shot, and then, then I felt better, like, immediately.
Mm-hmm.
But it does really, give you that, general sense of well-being, which is great. And it does give you confidence in a sense. But if you just completely go cold turkey, yeah, that's one of the worst things you can do.
And if you were to, on both sides, what would be the drawbacks of continuing to supplement with testosterone and I'm assuming, your numbers, how much you would want to supplement with, but what would be the drawbacks of continuing to supplement for the rest of your life? And what would be the drawbacks of not supplementing for the rest of your life?
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of people say, oh, it increases, let's say, heart attack and stroke risk, right, with testosterone. Well, the reason why that occurs is because as your testosterone levels rise, it actually signals your bone marrow to create more red blood cells and hemoglobin, which in turn, gives you more energy, gives you more oxygen carrying capacity, which is great. But the downside of that is it increases your hematocrit, which is the viscosity of your blood. And the more viscous your blood gets, the more it gets more like motor oil. Mm-hmm. And because your heart has to pump that through your cardiovascular system, that's what increases your cardiovascular risk. So as long as you keep that in check, where you donate blood every once in a while, and again, everyone's going to be a little bit different. Where I have some men that are genetically predisposed to very, very thick blood. They have to do it like almost every month, where others may have to do it every quarter, every 4 months, every 6 months, or maybe once a year. So everyone's going to be a little bit different there. But otherwise, I mean, that's really the main risk. At the end of the day, as long as you're not abusing it, you're just optimizing your levels, then they really haven't been able to show that there are any deleterious effects other than obviously PSA. So your testosterone levels, if they increase, can increase your prostate specific antigen. It can fuel cancers in that sense, but as long as you're constantly measuring that and staying on top of it and obviously being smart with it, then yeah, it's really not that big of a deal if you do it long term. You just feel better. And versus if you wanted to kind of live the rest of your life with fatigue, brain fog, low libido, the inability to to really build muscle, burn fat, and just kind of lose that drive, because that's kind of what drives us as men, that testosterone.
Yeah, very much so. And then at the same time having because women often don't realize they have testosterone too. Right. But they're not often looking to supplement with testosterone because they may not need that. They're usually looking to supplement with estrogen, or you would know better than I would. But what about, there's two questions I have. One is if someone's looking to increase their own testosterone naturally, or for a woman, maybe they're looking, and I don't want to simplify so much because it's so much more complex than me just saying, oh, testosterone for a man and estrogen for a woman. It's not that. There's so many other factors there, especially for women. But I'm just going to make it really simple. If someone, let's start with a man because it's the light switch, it's the easy one. If someone were to want to naturally increase their testosterone production, what would be maybe 3 things that they would do to naturally increase their testosterone production if they weren't either at an age or readiness, or maybe they had a risk factor or something they didn't want to supplement?
That's a very interesting question because I've been dealing with a lot of patients, young men before 30 that have lower testosterone than men in their 50s.
Wow.
We're talking about 1-200, 250, and I have some guys in their 50s, 700. I have one guy in his 47 that's at 1400, which is crazy. And he doesn't supplement with any testosterone. That's just natural. But it's interesting because he's like, I've always been involved in like extreme sports, so it's interesting to kind of see that play out in a person's personality and hobbies, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I have people ask me that question, like, how can I actually increase my testosterone? Well, I think, and again, this is just a theory, the reason why these younger men are having such low testosterone is from I think diet to some degree. They're not lifting heavy, actually weightlifting. Weightlifting obviously helps, especially when you're doing compound movements like squats and deadlifts. That's been shown clinically to help increase testosterone, not obviously to optimize it, but at least increase it to some degree. And I think unfortunately society as well, where again, men aren't men anymore, especially in the younger generations. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really playing a major issue in those young men's testosterone levels.
Yeah, it's one thing it's amazing to have men who are in touch with their feminine side, but to create a society without men being allowed to really be a man's man. I'm in a space right now which is in the not remote but fairly remote north, probably pretty remote for what you would consider.
Very remote.
You're in Florida right now, so but it's interesting because from a societal standpoint, you do see the difference, because people who live here, men and women who live here, there's a different way of life. You cut your firewood, you often fish or hunt, and so those are the types of things that are very closer to our primal makeup than sitting all day at a computer, which just does not serve our hormonal natural makeup, right? So, and then do you have anything for a woman? What would you say if they were to try and increase it naturally? Because women right now, I went through a few years of just having a lot of women approach me about different things, and I would just keep hearing the same things over and over: digestive issues, sleep issues, fatigue. I was just like, whoa. And meanwhile, I'm almost 50 and feeling like I'm 20 to 30, but I know that what I'm doing is different than what most people do, women or men. So is there anything that you notice for women?
Well, again, this is what I call the 3 pillars of the fountain of youth. And again, this actually applies to men and women. The first pillar is testosterone. And like you mentioned before, men obviously have it at significantly higher levels than women, but a lot of women I see are suboptimal in their testosterone levels. And, that's, one of the main reasons why they have fatigue as well. Again, if their testosterone level are so low, it's not signaling the bone marrow to create the red blood cells and hemoglobin to carry oxygen. If you don't have the oxygen, then you're really not going to have much energy, because 90% of your energy is derived directly from oxygen. So the more oxygen you carry in your blood, the more energy you have. And
mitochondria.
Yeah, exactly. And I know women's hormones are a little bit different than men. It may increase versus decrease, but their levels change. From when they're younger and obviously more vibrant and more fertile, so to speak, versus when they go into postmenopause. And then the second one is human growth hormone. Human growth hormone is obviously what we call, it's what everyone knows is the fountain of youth, right? It's responsible for helping build muscle, helping burn fat. It helps to stimulate collagen production in the skin. It helps with sleep, helps with recovery, so then you can actually go harder the next day and recover faster. A lot of people have, suboptimal human growth hormone levels. The ability to naturally increase that through, let's say, the utilization of peptides such as somorelin, ipamorelin, tesamorelin, and all the different peptides is a great way to, naturally, increase your human growth hormone production. And then the third pillar is NAD. So I'm sure you've heard about NAD. NAD plus, it's nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. It's a cofactor in every single, cell in our body. It's in every living organism. And there's so many amazing health, wellness, anti-aging, and longevity benefits from, its supplementation. Everything from lengthening your telomeres. So, chronologically, let's say I'm 42. Biologically, if I lived a really, really good life, I could be, let's say, 36. If I lived a really, really rough life, I could be, let's say, 49.
Yeah.
And what this does, so, by lengthening the telomeres, it allows for additional cell division. So the telomeres are basically the caps on your chromosomes. So, the chromosome is like that X, right? So it's got the little cap on all 4. Or another way to think of it, it's like a shoelace, right? So you got the little plastic or metal caps on the end. So every time your cell divides, it basically shaves off a piece of that cap. And then eventually shaves all of it, and then it unravels. And then that chromosome dies and the cell dies. Mm-hmm. But by allowing, additional, by extending the telomere, you allow for additional cell division, which, in turn, leads to longer life. It also helps to boost your metabolism, helps to increase athletic performance, makes mitochondrial function more efficient, reduces inflammation, improves cognitive function, reduces Alzheimer's risk, and even helps those people that are dealing with substance abuse issues wean off of whatever they're addicted to. It's awesome. But all 3 of those decrease as you get older. So as long as you supplement with it, right, and just replace the levels that you had when you were younger, you're going to feel tremendously better.
And what are your thoughts on NMN? NMN.
Yeah, so I get this all the time because again, Tony talks about NMN. You hear about NR. So NMN is nicotinamide mononucleotide, and NR is nicotinamide riboside. So both of those are precursors to NAD.
Mm-hmm.
And the theory is by providing your body with the precursors that it's going to convert into NAD. But that's like saying, hey, if I give myself DHEA, it's going to convert to testosterone. Well, that's not the case. It may or may not.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, if you have a low level of the raw materials, then obviously it's going to help to some degree. But if you actually look at the NR and NMN route, they took the supplement route. Okay, so here in the United States, under DSHEA, which is the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, there is no FDA oversight over any supplement whatsoever. As long as you don't claim anything, like you don't say you cure disease, that we absolutely do this, you can say whatever the heck you want.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, literally, and there's no third-party testing. A lot of the times with athletes, right? They get popped or get in trouble because they took a supplement that they thought was unadulterated that had actual testosterone in it. And then they lose their livelihood and they get suspended. Well, it's kind of the same thing with the supplements. Yeah. And with NAD, it's a prescription only. So, our patients are prescribed it. Right. And if you want to reach the masses, you go the supplement route. But it doesn't work as well.
Yeah.
So what we prescribe is the, actual NAD plus. So, I personally would rather go direct to the source than hope and pray that, if I give something over here, that eventually it's going to come this way. But, I understand it from a marketing perspective, a sales perspective, and just obviously a potential market perspective for them. So they can go after everyone on the planet. Whereas, we have to be more selective because we actually have to, have a relationship with them. We have to have their labs. We have to prescribe it. So on and so forth. But I would any day, NAD plus versus NMN or NR.
Well, I'm really glad I asked that because people get caught up and they think that because there's a label on it and because it's in a bottle that it's going to be okay. And I've gone through this for so many years with high performance athletes, and just that you can't take that because it's not, even if it has an NSA for sports or informed choice sticker on it, it's still not batch tested. So we'd have to get batch tested products that then would be clean. And then to your point about when it's for people to kind of get the idea, there's certain things that if they supplement with, it's not going to help them unless they happen to be low in it. So creatine would be one of them. If they're low in it, it's not going to hurt them to take it, but if they're low in it, that's when they're going to see the benefits. It's one of the more efficacious supplements as well. But to your point on, someone's taking testosterone, and you mentioned just some of the precursors that are happening, and it made me think of, testosterone and dopamine tend to be a little bit linked in terms of how they work with each other. And I don't understand it fully. That's not my area of expertise. But are there contraindications or certain medications that somebody should not be taking testosterone or maybe estrogen or some sort of combination of hormone therapy if they're on some sort of drug? Like I'm thinking of something like modafinil or any of the ADHD drugs, or are there things that they just should steer clear of if there's just a contraindication there?
Well, yeah, obviously, if there's a contraindication, absolutely. And interestingly enough, you speak about just pharmaceuticals in general. So when we talked about methylation in the beginning, one of the things that is determined genetically for us is our body's ability to metabolize pharmacokinetics, basically the pharmaceuticals that we ingest. So there's what we call pharmacokinetics and pharmacogenetics that actually determines how well you metabolize specific pharmaceuticals. So for example, I'm working with a couple, he's about maybe like 240 and she's like a $110. And, she can take like 4 Advil and he has a half of one, and, it works for him. And you would think that's, kind of counterintuitive, but because of his genetic makeup, his ability to metabolize that ibuprofen is different from hers. So what may work for him may not work for her, and vice versa. So, it's amazing where we are in, I guess you can say, in our times, the ability to just understand so much more about our body, because we do have, the ability to test and figure it out. Because, our thing is, once you understand the reason why, or once you are educated to what deficiencies you have, you could actually, then improve it, right? Because if you don't measure it, you can't improve it. And, that's what all, the diagnostic testing that we do is about, to be able to understand the deficiencies, to understand what we're working with regards to genetically. And from there, then we can make the necessary improvements or adjustments to obviously feel our best.
So if someone, I'm thinking of you have a company that specifically does this, but if someone is, whether they have access to your company or not, what would you recommend everybody to do if they're over 35 and they want to have their optimal performance? They want to feel their best and have optimal health. So they're not willing to compromise their health. They want to feel their best. Is their first step to get their like a full blood panel? What's their first step to really understand what their body needs?
Well, here's the problem. Even if you get a full blood panel, you're not going to understand how to interpret it.
Yep.
That's an issue. And then if you go to your doctor, they're going to say, oh, you're fine.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, I've actually developed a training course for the lay person. And right now when we do our lab reviews with our patients, just their blood lab reviews, we spend at least an hour to sometimes 90 minutes explaining each individual biomarker, how it correlates to a specific function in their body, and how they're going to feel when they optimize it. Because our foundational philosophy is education, because there is such a disconnect between patient and provider. Here in the US, they say the average interaction is 16 minutes between patient and provider. I call BS on that. I think it's more like 5 minutes, and then the doctor goes in the back and does paperwork for the insurance company for 11.
Yeah.
And you don't know what you're doing. Like, you have no idea. And when they go through your labs, it's like, yep, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. And even if it's about to fall outside of the clinical reference range, it's like, oh, just come back when it's out.
Yeah, because they're looking for the red flags that they need to actually pick up the problems. They're not going to do anything. Like, if you're actually healthy and you're not going to fall apart, then away you go. They're not looking for optimal health or optimal performance. They're looking for is there anything here going to
fix?
I need to save your life.
What can we prescribe? Basically what can we prescribe to fix this? And we understood that there was that that major disconnect, and that's why a lot of people can't take control of their own health and wellness. They can't take accountability or responsibility for health and wellness because they have no idea where to start.
Yeah.
Right? They don't understand the processes that are going in their body. And, I've spent years, trying to figure this out, where, we took something extremely complex, let's, obviously the medical jargon, the terminology, and we just tried to simplify it as much as possible so that a 5-year-old can even understand it.
Yeah.
Because then once you actually understand the process that's happening within the body, and then we correlate it to, let's say, the specific part of the protocol that's going to address that, now you understand the why.
Mm-hmm.
So once you understand the why, then you're more apt to follow through. Because one of the things that you hear physicians complain about and providers complain about is patient compliance.
Yeah.
Will they actually follow through with what you prescribe them? But if they don't understand why they're doing it, unless they're just following blindly, then people are going to have questions.
Yeah.
Or people are going to have doubts or concerns. But
they may not.
It's much easier to have an educated consumer in that sense. So then they can understand why they're doing it.
So is this training course that you've made, is it available on your website? Is it ready, or where are you at with it?
I'm still developing it. Yes. Yeah. So I've actually finished the patient-centric report. So if you ever had labs before, it's just basically your biomarkers, the result, the reference range, and whatever unit it is, right? It's, unless you're a medical professional, you have no idea how to interpret that.
Yeah.
What we can do with those, we can upload it to our platform, and then it'll spit out a very nice, beautiful report that is very visual, red, yellow, green, tell you exactly what you need to work on immediately. And then it also explains, each individual biomarker as well. So, it's a reference, for, the conversations that we have. So then people actually, like I said, understand it more. Yeah, but hopefully we'll finalize the course by the end of this year.
Amazing. And I want to be sensitive to time here. Just quick, so that people can get a sense, because now we have a lot of information, and now people are probably wondering about themselves. But what got you into all of this? You've been in a few other companies and you've got family members who are physicians, but you didn't go to school for hormone replacement therapy. You went to school for business and finance. And how did you end up down this path?
Well, interestingly enough, so I'm 6'2" and I'm 196 right now. I used to be this height and $135 when I was 13. So literally, if there was a stiff wind, like I'd either freeze to death or blow over. And I worked at a nutrition store when I was a teenager because I wanted to figure out what I could do to build muscle, get lean, so on and so forth. So I literally read every page in what was it, Bill Phillips' Body for Life. He was the founder of EAS. So I memorized that. I remember talking about creatine to people that would come in, ATP, blah blah, and it's just been a lifestyle of mine. And that's kind of where it started. And through happenstance, I worked in the pharmaceutical drug delivery technology space, so that's why I'm familiar with supplements and what happens with cGMP manufacturing. I've actually developed a few formulations, myself, and I also worked in the cannabis space, and also was the chief operating officer of the company that Grant Cardone just purchased. That's now a 10XL system. So, just kind of through, I guess you could say, a circuitous route, but it was always like a lifestyle and a passion of mine.
Yeah.
So that's how. I always wanted to, kind of figure out how to hack my own body. Because, I saw people that would be, let's say very muscular and lean, and, they would eat whatever they wanted to, and they wouldn't work out much. I'm like, well, how in the world are they doing that?
Mm-hmm.
And, it wasn't until, I really started digging in to understand how the body worked, because there's, so many things that you can do to really minimize, let's say, the negative impact of, let's say, certain foods. Right. Mm-hmm. And, I drink multiple times a week. I drink alcohol multiple times a week. I eat desserts, but I just understand how, or what I need to do to make sure I don't impact that. And I've only done cardio 10 times in the last year almost. Mm-hmm. And, I still hover around 10% body fat. Mm-hmm. It's just about understanding, how the body works and, basically cheating the genome.
Yeah, you've dialed in on exactly what your body needs for it to be the way that you want or the way that you feel the best. And that's where I feel like I've dialed in too. I know exactly what time I need to eat, whether I put this with that, because just paying attention along the way and figuring it out. And it's huge for people to have somebody in their back pocket to help them figure it out for themselves too, when they've kind of been going blindly through life toward their body, but clearly focusing on other things, maybe their family or their career or whatever, but not having that awareness around what their body might need. So I think your services are really powerful. To wrap up, is there anything that a message or anything that you would impart for people that you wish everyone knew, or you wish the 30-year-old version of you knew, or all these people that you're seeing, you want them to know blank? What would that be?
Well, I think you have to be your own advocate in your own health and wellness journey. No one's going to do it for you. The experts are there, so to speak. But again, what do they say? The teacher doesn't appear, until the student's ready. So, when you're ready, and you start really kind of digging for that information, you're going to find, a treasure trove of information nowadays. Back then, it wasn't as readily available, but now it is. And you also have to be careful of, where you get that information from as well. What do they talk about? The bro science piece of it, where it's like, oh, just do this and yeah, you will gain weight or whatever it is. All the stuff that we do is based on, clinical research. So, I don't put credence in anything unless it has peer-reviewed, studies, or it's on NIH or whatever it may be. Yeah. Because again, there's so many people that, and again, if you research something and you're expecting a particular result, you're going to have confirmation bias no matter what.
Yeah.
So, it's good to have, multiple, points of view and perspectives, when especially, you're looking at something as important as your health. Yeah.
And then figuring it out, whether it actually is going to work for you or not, based on how your body responds and how you feel, and step by step. So yeah. That's very powerful. So how can our listeners find you? You've got your website, which is www.4bpm.com. Is that correct?
That's right.
Is there anywhere else that they can find you for reaching out?
LinkedIn, is where I'm at too. So just Ben Lee, BenLee 2828 is my my LinkedIn handle. And I also wanted to touch on. Remember, we were talking about the charity, and it took me a while to figure out who I wanted to support here. So interestingly enough, I spoke to I met these two incredible women the other day, and the charity is called Elite Funds Freedom, and it's all about educating, and empowering, people to basically prevent sex trafficking and human exploitation. And they actually have a national hotline, and I love the number. It's 888-3737-888. So if you see anything happening that's not supposed to be happening, call that number. They'll send somebody to go check out on it, or whatever it may be. And obviously, to support the group, if you make a donation, let's say you make a donation and keep the receipt, we'll match whatever it is in a discount for whatever services that that you do through us. So
that's huge. That's huge.
So support the charity, and obviously get healthy while doing it too.
That's amazing. So we really appreciate that, and I really appreciate you drawing attention to that, because it's something that we sometimes don't want to look at. So thank you for drawing attention to that, and also providing that kind of option for people coming to see you. So
yeah, and I think the website is elitefundsfreedom.org .org, elitefundsfreedom.org. Yeah, ELITEFUNDSFREEDOM.org. Beautiful.
And your website is 4bpm.com, and it's Ben Lee. So thank you so much for sharing your breadth of knowledge and wisdom with us, and your own personal experience as well. I think it really helps answer a lot of things that people want to know that maybe they can't get from their doctor, they're confused by online, and it just gives a little more insight and maybe confidence to make some different decisions for themselves. So thank you so much, Ben Lee, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Yeah, same here. Thank you so much for having me.